Okay, the time has come for everyone's favorite tutorial. I certainly like this one. This is the duck, so we're going to make some organic objects in Rhino. Okay, so as a reminder, we're at for.rhino3d.com/for/help, and then I go to Getting Started, Introduction, and then go down to Create Organic Shapes and Start. So first of all, the assignment instructs you to open up the millimeter workspace. We're not going to worry about units of measure just yet. And it has us make two spheres, which we do in a side view, one sphere above the other, and the top sphere a little bit smaller. So let's head back to Rhino. If you're working in a current file, I could just select all this stuff, right-click a layer, and say Move Objects to this layer, and then hide it so that we can get it back later. Or you can keep them as separate files. It's up to you. I'll switch this viewport back to shaded as well. Okay, so let's come in from the right-hand side. I will grab my sphere tool, sphere from the center and the radius, hit 0 to anchor myself there, and then we'll just make the duck yay big. So in this particular case, what really matters is proportion as opposed to specific numbers. I'll right-click to repeat the previous command and repeat the sphere. And then my second sphere will be about here, maybe a little bit smaller, kind of sticking out in front of the first one a little bit. So if I look here from the top, I actually want these two to be in line. So they are in line here, but not in the right view. So maybe I should have made these in the right view. Oh no, that's correct. Okay, so now the duck is sort of facing up the green y-axis. Okay, back to Firefox. Okay, let's see here. Now, we're going to take these spheres and make them deformable through a process called rebuild. And it wants us to add in the degrees and make them 3 and 3 for the U and V. And the point count should be 8 and 8. So let's go ahead and do that. So rebuild. You might be able to do these both at once. We want this to be 8, 8, and 3 and 3. And then I'll say rebuild. And now you can see there's more of these iso curves that are defining the shape of the sphere as compared to this one down here, which has fewer. I'll hit enter to repeat the previous command, and we like the settings as they are. So I'll go ahead and hit rebuild. And one of the things I want to verify here is that the direction of the rebuild looks the same. So you can see these circles radiating out from the center in the front viewport. And when I switch back to Rhino, my front is actually at an angle. So I could fix this if I wanted to by coming down on the top view and picking rotate, setting 0 as the axis of rotation, coming out here to the right, and then flopping this 90 degrees. It automatically went to 90, deleting the old one, because I had ortho selected. So I'm just making sure that my screen looks exactly like the tutorial screen, so now the front should look like this, and indeed the front looks like that. Or I could have just, paid attention and set it up correctly first time. Okay, now to modify the body shape, we want to reveal the control points that are making up this sphere. So think about control points kind of like little planets that are exerting gravitational force on an object, and as you move those planets further away, they pull the shape, into a kind of distortion, and as you move them closer, they can dimple or indent that shape. They're also having us drag a selection box of these points from left to right along the bottom. So let's see, control points on. Let's go do that first. So I can start typing in control points. I might just do this with a button. Let's use this one right here. So this is control points on. And then I will select all of these right here. So you'll see it's the 6 that are at the bottom, and I'm not touching that central area with those points. Okay, so I get those. And then if I look in from the side, I can see that I selected some control points all the way across that were hidden from my view when I selected in the front view. Okay, now it has us doing the set point command, and we want to set Z and align to world. So let's try that out. Front view, set PT. We're just worried about moving in Z, align to world. And now I can kind of move these up and down until I flatten my duck's body out. Maybe I'll turn on grid snap for this. So going all the way up to 0 is a little bit too much. You see I get these weird deformations, so I might do something more like that. Okay, so that gives us a little kind of flat but not too distorted and weird looking bottom for our duck to sit on. Okay, now it's having us come in and drag the tail out. So let's come in again from the side. And sometimes this will take a little bit of experimentation, so maybe I can try selecting these 2 points all the way through and just dragging those around with my mouse. I'll need to turn ortho off for this so I have a little bit more freedom. So maybe I want that tail to be sort of up at a jaunty angle. And as I rotate around the duck, I can see if I'm causing any weird pinches or other structures like that. And that's looking pretty good to me. You know, maybe I would come in and individually move points around if I don't want this thing to be so symmetrical, but I'm going to stick to symmetrical for right now. Okay, drag the control points for the chest, so we're getting the chest kind of rounded out, making this guy a little more boxy. So let's come in here and say, maybe I'll select this group and kind of pull this out like that. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm coming in from the side and looking around. Sometimes the shaded viewport can make it a little hard to tell what's going on, so you could switch this over to rendered, which is also a little bit hard to read, but I think that's actually pretty good for showing us what's happening. Okay, so our duck is taking shape. And then it says press the escape key repeatedly until the points turn off. Sometimes you have to do it more than once. Okay, next up. Now we're going to make the beak, kind of the same thing as before. So I select this circle, I turn on my points right here. I'm just going to pick a couple to pull straight out, so I might want to turn ortho on to help me with that, and have my duck's face look something like this. It also has it pull up at a little bit of an angle, so now I'll turn ortho off and maybe just pull it up like that, or for example I could just reselect just the front points, so I can make this a little more articulated. Good. So, you know, we're making stuff on the computer, we want to make sure it doesn't look too digitized and too regular. Do something like that. All right, cool. So now we start getting in here to separate our features out. We're going to separate the bill, or I guess what I was calling the beak, from the head. We'll start doing that by creating an interpolate point curve. So up here, I think that's a control point curve. So if I open up the menu, I get interpolate points. And what interpolate points is going to do, I'll turn off grid snap as well, is I just sort of click around and then I get a line that's going to try to adopt. It's going to be like a bendy piece of wood that's trying to hit each of those points as it goes. Although I think the shape that we want is actually kind of the opposite of what I just made. So let's see here. I'll delete that, redo the interpolate points command, and it kind of comes in and then goes out at the bottom. Okay, cool. So we'll do something like this. And, you know, this may take some experimentation to get this right, so I'm just going to do it however it goes, and then, you know, you can take the time to make yours absolutely perfect. Okay, we want to split the surface with the curve. So there's trim and split. Trim will delete one of the sides, whereas split just breaks something in half. So let's type in split. Objects to split are the head. Splitting objects are the line. And because I'm in the front view, it's understood that the line is going to project all the way through the beak, even though it's just like a piece of string. And I'll hit enter, and down here at the bottom I see split into 2 pieces. And I should be able to select these individually at this point. Cool. Now, if you don't like how your shape looks, you know, take the time to go back and make it look better, but I'm going to stick with that one for now because this is just a demo. Okay, next up. Now we want to model the neck, so this will involve, if I'm not mistaken, doing a trim, which I mentioned a moment ago, and we'll do that with a cut plane. Okay, so come in through the side, type in cut plane, and we're going to make a straight line across the bottom. I'm just holding down shift, but you can do this with ortho as well, and that will automatically make a plane that's the right size to accomplish this cut. And hit enter. I might scooch this up just a little bit, but I want to make sure it doesn't impact the place where the beak is separated from the head. So I get something like that. Okay, we head back to here, and then we see we're going to select trim and use trim to lop off the bottom of the head. Type in trim, My cutting object is my cutting plane, and then right click or enter, and then this is the part to be cut. Now sometimes when you do this, because of the way that the sphere is broken up into parts, you have to do it more than once. So you want to make sure to delete all of that extra geometry so that nothing falls beneath that cutting plane, and hit enter, and then I can just get rid of my cutting plane as well. So now I've kind of popped a hole in the bottom of this thing. Okay, so I don't know if it'll say this in the tutorial, but I think I might also move this duck head back a little bit. Yeah, so it's more solidly over the body. Okay, cool. Now we're going to cut a hole in the body for the neck, and we'll do this with this command extrude CRV, or extrude curve. And this one can get a little tricky. Here I might switch back to shaded to see what we're doing, because we need to extrude all of this curve at once as opposed to just part of it. And because the neck didn't want to cut all in one piece, it's more likely to generate multiple pieces. So extrude CRV, and when I select the curves to extrude, you see it doesn't want to give me the full neck unless I go in there and really tell it you have to do both lines. And then I hit enter or right click the mouse, and then I'll extrude that well into the body, so I'm absolutely sure that it is coming into contact all the way around its perimeter with the body. Okay, so there we do. We got our extrusion. Now we go back and we do another trim, and this time we will use the neck to trim a hole in the body. This can also get a little bit weird because you might have to do it more than once. So I'll switch over to ghosted view, which might help, and then I'll say trim. Actually, I like the front view for this. So the cutting object is the neck, and then the object to be cut is the body. And that time I got lucky, so you can see that that cut runs all the way through, and so I didn't have to do it in two pieces. So I can hit enter to finish the command, and then we're going to get rid of that extruded neck because it's too rigid, you know, it's too computery looking. We want to have more of a blended neck. But at this point you should note that we've been working with solids up until now, but once we cut a hole in a solid, it essentially reduced it to a series of surfaces that have absolutely no physical matter. So this would not be a 3D printable object, and this will become very important later. We always need to restore surfaces to solid objects in order to have the most flexibility when working with them. Okay, let's see. So now we're going to make the duck's neck, and we're going to use blend surf or blend SRF. Blend SRF, and you'll notice as I'm entering these commands, I'm constantly changing around my view and rotating it to make the clearest indication to the computer what I want. So the first edge in this case is going to be the lower neck. That one selects in one piece. That's great. And it understands that now we're moving right on to the second edge. So I'll click here, but I'll need to click twice. Oh, it's having some trouble with that. You know, I might need to start on the top. So I'll hit cancel. Enter to repeat the command. Okay, so select first edge. I'm going to check chain edges so that it understands that the edges I've selected, one right after the other, are still part of part one. Okay, so now I hit enter. Oh man, see, sometimes you got to do these a couple times to really figure it out. Okay, first edge, chain edges is checked. 1, 2. Now it's understanding that we need to move on to the second edge. So I'll click down here. And then it gives me a little sense of the direction in which the line, you want these lines to be moving in the same direction, and if they're not, you can drag those arrows around. So now I'll hit enter. And if I move this window open, now you can see my blend starting to take place. So the computer is kind of interpolating where the surface was heading from the top, where it was heading from the bottom, and then blends them together. And you can mess around with all these and sort of make the different features more or less aggressive. I'm going to leave it pretty much at the default. Let's take another spin around. That's looking pretty good. So I'll hit OK. All right, so you see pretty quickly we're just starting off with two spheres, and already we have a fairly recognizable object that doesn't just look like it fell right out of a computer. I mean, it kind of does. So there's our blend, and then finally at the end it says use the join command, should join together all three parts. So I select everything and say join. And if I don't get an error at the bottom, here's what you always love to see. 4 surfaces or polysurfaces joined into one closed polysurface. So closed polysurfaces are generally the thing that we're trying to arrive at for the most flexibility. Okay, now here's one that always trips up my students, so let's jump in. We're going to make an ellipsoid, and this is going to be the eyeball of the duck. We're going to do this in the top view. Okay, so I'm going to pick, instead of sphere, ellipsoid, and from center, I might put on grid snap just for kicks. So I've established its center, and then I make one dimension and the second dimension, and those should both be equal. So from the top, this thing needs to look like a circle, but then from the side, we're going to kind of squash it. So I'll turn off grid snap, and I can get something like that. So there's my eyeball. Okay, next up we want to make a pupil on that eyeball. So I will grab my center O-snap, find the edge, and then you can just kind of do this visually depending on how big you think you want that eyeball to look. So that's just a line, right, which we call a curve in Rhino. And now I will say split, although I may have to project it onto that surface. So the cutting object is this guy. Yeah, I will have to project it. Okay, let me back up and do that a different way. So I've got my ellipsoid down here on the ground. I'm going to add a circle using my center O-snap. This will be the pupil of the eye. And then I'll take that pupil line and I'll say project. I select the surfaces to project onto, and if you watch carefully in the perspective view, you can see that now that flat circle has been projected all the way up onto the top and bottom surfaces of the eyeball. And we really just need one. We can just delete the other two. Because now when I say split, I can say object to split is the ellipsoid, and then the splitting object is the curve. And now I've got two nice surfaces here that I can render as different colors. In fact, I'll shift select them, move them off to the side, and then delete these lines right here because I don't need them right now. Okay, so now I take this thing, I'll group it together, and we've kind of gone ahead a little bit in the instructions. So we did our pupil. Yeah, so now it's time to add in some colors. And we covered this in the flashlight tutorial, but we can kind of talk about it again real quick. Let me ungroup this. I'll select one of the objects, grab its material. This may look a little different if you're on the PC, but I think you can find it. And we want to make a new material. I happen to have a white plastic here already, so I might just go ahead and pick that. And if I switch over to rendered, I guess everything looks like it's being kind of rendered in white right now. Now let's grab the pupil, and we want to make a new black material for that. Let's call it plastic. We will make the color black. And you can mess around with reflectivity and transparency and stuff all you want. But now we have an eyeball to mess around with, so I can regroup this. You could make the duck whatever color you want. I'm actually going to explode it at this point. So I'm rendering it back into individual surfaces because I want to be able to make some of these surfaces different colors. So I'll join back together the body, and now my beak and my body are separate. So let's make... say a plastic that is orange for the beak. It's kind of nice to see it update live like that. Great. And then you can also take a look and see, do you like how that beak is laid out? I think it looks pretty good. It's kind of a strange shape. You might make yours a little different. And finally, we'll make one more material here for plastic, and we will make that duck yellow. So again, we're going to get into some really cool, funky stuff in V-Ray that's going to let us go absolutely bananas on the rendering front. But this is just how to do some basic stuff so that it doesn't just look like a stock image. That's a very shiny duck. Okay, so here's an interesting one. We have to figure out how to get this eyeball oriented on the surface, and this one seems to stump my students every time. Let's see if I can get it done on the first time. So I'm going to say orient on SRF, because we want that eyeball to land at sort of a strange angle because the duck's head is no longer, it's not like a flashlight or something geometric. Okay, the base point of orient on surface, assuming you've made your eyeball exactly as I have, is going to be the center while looking down in the top view. Then we just need to head out in any direction, really, because it's, symmetrical. So I'll just check ortho and go off to the right. Okay. The surface to orient onto, I'll click on the duck's head, and it's going to ask some questions, and I'm just going to say that's fine. And then now as I move this around, you can see that it is adopting, a kind of realistic position on that head. So I don't have to do all this work where I'm rotating the thing in multiple directions in order to get it to stick to the head. If you wanted to, when you did this, you could try to bury it a little bit deeper by putting your original orientation points in a slightly different place. But I'll go ahead and stick with this for now. Okay. And then finally, I'll come up to the top and I'll type in mirror. Because I built this duck, right here, the center is at 0 on the X and Y axis. The mirror plane, if I hit grid snap, is just basically starting at 0 and coming off to the right or left. I have copy checked, so I'll left click there again, and then I'll get a duck that looks something like this. I'm going to rotate around that guy. Pretty good. So let's double check with the tutorial here and see if there's anything else they're talking about. They did the mirror just like we did. They did the rendering more or less just like we did. There's some stuff you can get into with lights as well. If you want, you can experiment with that. However, I would just wait until we talk about V-Ray, which is coming up quite soon. But if you want, here's a way to add a spotlight. You could have your duck, sitting on a material that looks like water and sort of the world's your oyster. But there you go. That's the duck tutorial.